What happens when a new CEO thinks he can erase years of loyalty and relationships in one cold afternoon? My name is Marcus Lane. For 17 years, I built and led the Midwest sales division of Brightwell Publishing in Kansas City. When I started, we were nothing but a struggling branch office no one noticed, but step by step, handshake by handshake, I turned it into the heart of the company. Last year alone, my team generated over 60% of the entire company's revenue. We didn't need fancy apps or consultants. We had loyalty, relationships, trust. But then Evan Hartley came in, the new CEO. Evan had a resume full of buzzwords: disruption, efficiency, streamlining. He'd never sold a book in his life, but he knew how to impress a boardroom. Within his first 2 months, everything started to shift. The monthly leadership meetings became sterile. No talk of customers, just endless pie charts and optimization, strategies. It didn't matter that my division outperformed every other. It didn't matter that half our clients had been with me for more than a decade. To Evan, I was just old guard, expendable. The meeting came faster than I expected. A cold Tuesday afternoon. His assistant, nervous and apologetic, handed me a memo. Executive review meeting, 2 p.m., conference room B. I knew what it meant. Still, I finished my call with Stonemere Press, finalizing a $14 million renewal deal. The kind of deal you don't close with a slick sales deck. The kind you close by showing up at someone's kid's wedding anniversary, year after year. Conference room B felt like a hospital. White walls, minimalist furniture, empty smiles. Evan sat at the head of the table, polished and perfect in his tailored suit. Beside him, HR. Beside HR, a folder already labeled with my name. He didn't waste time. Marcus, Brightwell needs fresh leadership to match the evolving marketplace, he said, voice calm and rehearsed. No mention of my numbers. No thank you for nearly 2 decades of loyalty. No acknowledgement of the thousands of nights I spent on the road building this empire. Just the thin, sanitized corporate speak of someone who had already moved on. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I shook his hand, nodded to HR, and walked out, with my head held high. 17 years, reduced to a 10-minute formality. Packing my office felt surreal. There were no speeches, no goodbyes, only the sound of a cardboard box folding under the weight of framed memories. As I loaded my car, my phone buzzed. 6 missed calls. All from clients. The word was already out. That night at home, I poured myself a drink and stared at the severance. Package, 6 months' salary, 3 months of health benefits, a strict non-compete agreement, a cold, lifeless NDA. They thought paperwork could erase relationships, but relationships live outside of contracts. Within 24 hours, the calls kept coming. Clients furious, clients heartbroken, clients ready to follow wherever I went. It wasn't about sales, it was about trust. And Evan, he didn't even realize he had already lost the only thing that mattered. I wasn't going to break the non-compete. I wasn't going to burn bridges. I was going to build something better. Quietly, patiently. Because real legacies aren't made in corner offices. They're made in the spaces between trust and loyalty. Places Evan Hartley would never reach. After the shock wore off, I realized I was holding a secret weapon, something Evan Hartley didn't even know he'd handed me. My reputation. Clients weren't loyal to Brightwell Publishing. They were loyal to the relationships my team and I had built over years. And they were already calling. Not angrily, not demanding refunds, but asking me one simple question. Where are you going next? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew I had to be smart. The non-compete was airtight. Any direct move into the same industry could trigger lawsuits Brightwell's. Lawyers would be all too happy to file. So I chose a different path. Instead of competing head-on, I started something new. Lane Strategies. Not a publisher. Not a sales agency, a consulting firm, specializing in helping independent presses and authors grow their brands. And most importantly, maintain control of their work. It wasn't just a workaround, it was a better way. The best part? My former clients didn't just support it, they needed it. Because while Brightwell was busy chasing digital transformation buzzwords, they had forgotten something basic. Authors want to be heard, publishers want to be respected, readers want authenticity, and that's what Lane's strategies promised. At first, it was just me, a rented office above a bakery, and a second-hand laptop. But within a month, I had 3 former clients under retainer. Then 5. Then 12. Brightwell's competitors noticed. Small presses Brightwell had ignored for years started reaching out, eager for help navigating the market without losing their soul. And quietly, so quietly, Brightwell's sales began to slip. Meanwhile, Evan remained blissfully unaware. He was busy presenting bold new strategies to the board, hosting leadership summits about next-gen scaling, rolling out massive rebranding efforts. But inside Brightwell, panic. Top sales managers resigned one after another. Clients left without explanation. The once rock-solid Midwest division reported its worst quarter in 15 years, and still Evan blamed market turbulence, never once considering that what he had really lost wasn't a product line, he had lost trust. 3 months after my firing, an email landed in my inbox, from a board member, short, polite, urgent. "Marcus, would you be open to a private conversation?" I smiled. I wasn't surprised. When you build something real, something human, they can cut you out of the building, but they can't erase your impact. And now, they were realizing the cost of forgetting that. The meeting wasn't held at Brightwell's towering headquarters downtown. No, it was arranged at a quiet private business club, a place known for hosting discreet conversations far away from boardrooms and headlines. I wore no tie, no suit, just a button-down and a jacket. If they wanted me back, they were going to see the real version of me, not the corporate image Evan Hartley had tried to erase. Inside, 2 familiar faces waited for me. Margaret Langston, head of the Compensation Committee, David Reynolds, longest-serving member of the board. I remembered when both of them had signed my first promotion letter a decade ago. Margaret offered a tight smile. David looked uncomfortable. Good. It meant they understood the weight of the moment. They skipped pleasantries. "Marcus, Brightwell is in trouble," Margaret said, voice clipped. David nodded gravely. "Worse than the public numbers suggest." He slid a confidential report across the table. I didn't pick it up immediately. I wanted to hear it from them. "Revenue's down 34% in the Midwest, 29% nationwide," David said. "We've lost 3 major publishing clients, and 5 more are threatening to terminate," Margaret added, citing trust issues. They looked at me like men stranded in a desert, finding a map they had tossed away months before. "We need you back," Margaret said. There it was. The words I knew would come eventually, but I didn't rush in. I leaned back, steepling my fingers, studying them. "On what terms?" I asked calmly. David cleared his throat. "Executive leadership. You'd oversee Midwest operations initially." I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "If I come back at the top. President of Global Operations. Full authority to rebuild not just the sales model, but the culture." Margaret's eyes widened. David looked pained. "That's a big ask," he said. "Not an ask," I replied. "A necessity. I wasn't being arrogant. I knew what the company needed. Someone who remembered that clients weren't line items, that relationships weren't bullet points on a quarterly earnings report. That real leadership was felt, not enforced. They fell into a hushed discussion. Finally, Margaret spoke. "We'll take it to the board." "Take your time," I said. Meanwhile, I'll be expanding Lane strategies. I stood up, shook their hands, and left them sitting there. I wasn't desperate. They were. 2 weeks passed. During that time, Lane strategies exploded. More small presses signed on. A handful of Brightwell's international clients quietly requested meetings. The business wasn't just growing. It was thriving, without corporate gimmicks, without executive jargon, just good people doing good work, exactly the way it used to be. The offer arrived on a rainy Thursday, formal, sealed, respectful, President of Global Operations, full executive oversight of Brightwell's domestic and international sales arms, authority to restructure divisions, budgetary independence, and buried, in the fine print, an apology, a formal retraction of the non-compete clause, effective immediately. But before accepting, I made a few calls. I called every single member of my former team. Some were working elsewhere. Some were tired. Some were hesitant. I told them my plan. Not just to rebuild the old Brightwell, I said, but to build something better. Where clients are treated like partners, employees are treated like family. Almost every single one said the same thing. When do we start? Meanwhile, Evan Hartley's downfall was quiet but complete. The board, desperate to save face, asked for his resignation, effective immediately, after a confidential audit confirmed mishandled contracts and plummeting morale. No farewell party, no press release, just a sterile goodbye email sent late Friday night. By Monday, he was forgotten. And me? I walked back through Brightwell's doors not as a returning employee, but as a man with a mission. No champagne, no grand speeches, just a quiet determination to fix what mattered most. Trust, honor. People. Because Brightwell's real future wasn't in quarterly gains or flashy marketing. It was in every handshake, every honest deal, every long-term client who believed that integrity still mattered. And now, it would again. My first day back at Brightwell wasn't triumphant. It was humbling. The company I loved looked the same on the surface. Polished floors, glass-walled offices, sleek branding plastered. Everywhere. But underneath it, the soul was missing. Employees didn't make eye contact. People spoke in hushed tones. There was a sharpness to the air, a tension I hadn't felt before. Fear had replaced pride. And fear, I knew, was terrible fertilizer for growth. I didn't sit in my new executive suite. Instead, I spent my first week walking the floors. Unannounced. I sat with the entry-level account managers, the junior editors, the assistants no one remembered during all-hands meetings. I asked simple questions. What's the hardest part of your day? If you could change one thing about how we work, what would it be? What do you miss about Brightwell from the old days? At first, they were cautious. They weren't used to executives asking, let alone listening. But slowly, honesty returned. Stories poured out. About unrealistic quotas. About managers pushing quantity over quality. About feeling like cogs in a machine that no longer cared about them. It wasn't a broken company. It was a forgotten one. Forgotten by leaders who measured success only by stock prices and merger buzzwords. Forgotten by a system that saw numbers, but not people. So, we started over. The first major change wasn't flashy. We abolished aggressive quarterly quotas that rewarded short-term deals at the expense of long-term partnerships. Instead, we implemented a new model. Relationship-based incentives, sales reps, were now rewarded not just for closing deals, but for renewing clients year after year. Editors were given time to develop deeper relationships with their authors, focusing on loyalty over speed. We doubled the budget for customer service training. We reinstated community days, where employees could volunteer with local non-profits on company time, and every new hire, no matter the role, was required to spend 2 weeks shadowing frontline workers. Resistance came, of course. There were those who had grown comfortable in the old ways. Some managers left, some pushed back, but most Most stayed, because deep down they had been waiting for permission to care again. The second major change involved the clients. I personally visited every major client Brightwell had. Left not with a PowerPoint, not with a sales pitch, with coffee, with time, with a simple message. We lost our way. We forgot you were more than contracts. We're here to make it right. Some clients were skeptical. Some needed time. But trust, once burned, can regrow when fed, with humility. Slowly, they returned. One by one. Meanwhile, Lane Strategies, my little side project, continued to thrive. But instead of competing with Brightwell, it became something else, an incubator. We partnered with Brightwell to develop emerging authors, offering mentorship, resources, and independent pathways for creators who didn't fit the traditional mold. It wasn't about domination anymore. It was about community, and that made all the difference. A year after my return, Brightwell hosted its first real staff retreat in over a decade. No executives-only country clubs, no overpriced leadership consultants, just everyone, together. At a local retreat center surrounded by woods and quiet lakes. There, under a sprawling oak tree, we held an open forum. Anyone could speak. No titles, no hierarchy. People shared ideas, frustrations, hopes. One junior editor, barely a year out of college, stood up and said, "This is the first time since I started working that I feel like my voice actually matters." The applause that followed was the loudest sound all weekend. The numbers caught up to the culture. Client retention hit record highs. Employee turnover dropped by 60%. Brightwell's stock quietly stabilized, but I didn't measure success that way anymore. I measured it in how many smiles I saw walking the halls, how many client thank you notes ended up tacked to the bulletin boards, how many late nights I spent with teams who believed again, not in me, but in what we were rebuilding together. Then came the final piece. The board of directors approached me quietly one afternoon. They asked me to consider stepping into the role of CEO. I thought about it long and hard, and I said no. Not because I didn't want to lead, but because leadership, I had learned, isn't about titles. It's about presence. It's about legacy. I recommended someone else instead, a rising leader who had started as an assistant, someone who understood the heart of the company better than any outsider ever could. They accepted, and I stayed on, mentoring, guiding, building quietly from behind the scenes. Exactly where I belonged. Because true leadership isn't standing at the top of a pyramid. It's standing at the foundation, lifting others higher than you ever stood yourself. And if I left Brightwell better than I found it, that was enough, more than enough. Today, when I walk into Brightwell, I don't see a company, I see a community. And when new employees ask about what changed, the veterans smile and say, "We remembered who we were, and that made all the difference." If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because real leadership isn't about power, it's about people.